Hi, I'm Luke Clausen. This is Beyond the Basics. Well, everybody knows what a shaky head is. It's been out for quite a few years, caught fish all over the country. We use it every day in these tour events. It's made a lot of anglers a lot of money. It's something that's part of our arsenal. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the way I like to fish a shaky head and what worm I use. My three favorite shaky head worms are, one is a Z-Man Fatties, a little bit bigger worm. I throw it on a bait caster a lot, 12-pound line, a little heavier head, even 15-pound line, fish around docks, laydowns, wherever you get around more cover. You can't get away with a spinning rod, still have a real subtle presentation. You expand your opportunity to fish more waters than you could before with a shaky head and still land some of those bigger fish. The other two primary worms I like to throw are a little 4-inch Z-Man finesse worms. And I like that when it's tough. The fish aren't real big, water's real clear. You get a lot of bites on it. It's just a bait you're always gonna get some bites on. And then when you get to places with bigger largemouth, they're biting a little better. Move up to that 7-inch worm. Sometimes with dirtier water, they can find that worm a little bit better. Let's get out in the water and give them a try. As far as a rod for the power finesse, the Z-Man Fatties, that style of fishing, I like a Mega Bass Tour Versatile. It's a 7-foot rod, a heavy action, medium heavy, something like that. I like a 7-foot length. Some people like a little shorter, but the important thing is to have enough tip that it's going to load a little bit when you cast it, so you can get a little bit more speed on your bait, have that accuracy, and yet still have the power to get those fish out of the cover that you didn't have throwing a shaky head on a spinning rod up in laydowns, docks, all that kind of stuff. You need to have that rod, but it's important to have a little bit of tip. The Z-Man Fatties is a bait that I've used a lot in the last couple of years, and I always call it kind of a power finesse technique. And it's a little bit bigger, bulkier worm. It's still a small profile, but it's bigger than the average little finesse worm. And I like to throw it on a bait caster, a little bit heavier line, and pitch it around laydowns, docks, heavier cover where normally you never felt comfortable fishing with a spinning rod and 6 or 8-pound line. Now you have a lot more power. You can actually cover a little bit more water. You're just a little bit more efficient, a little faster, a little less finesse, but you still have that edge with a worm like this. You're gonna get probably 80% of your bites on the fall, so you want that bait to land where you think a fish is gonna be. I like to use a 3/16 or a 1/4 ounce head, but a lot of that is you want enough weight there to be able to have contact with the bottom, but you don't want it to fall very fast. The intrigue about a shaky head is the fall to it, why it spirals down. So you don't want a super heavy head. You just want enough to keep bottom contact. Obviously fishing a little deeper, a little windier, sometimes you need a little bit more weight, but most of the time I like to throw 3/16 to that Fatties and fish around that cover where you haven't been throwing a spinning rod. You know, fishing the Z-Man Fatties, I like it around laydowns and stuff, but probably one of my favorite places for it is around boat docks. It allows you to get away with a little bit heavier line when the water's got a little bit of color, and gives you a little bit of a safety net. You don't know what you're going to encounter for cables or brush or whatever around these docks, and you hook a 5 or 6 pounder, you can have your hands full with a spinning rod. Feel a little bit better with a little bit heavier line, get a little bit bigger worm, you probably improve your odds at catching a bigger fish than you would on a smaller, more slender worm, but yet it's still a good finesse presentation. It still has that great shaky head fall. Really, when throwing these Fatties around these docks, I like a 3/16 ounce head, and it really skips pretty well on a bait caster. You're catching a lot of those fish on the fall. You don't need to spend a lot of time with it. Lift it up a few times, work it through there, pitch again. You just want to make a lot of presentations and focus on areas of shade on the dock. That's it. Those fish are going to use the shade more often than they're even going to use the brush or anything underneath of it a lot of times. And usually have a pretty good idea on some of these docks. They have lights, and a lot of them have brush out front of them, so you want to keep an eye on your graph too, where you can spin the boat around and throw to a little piece of brush. When picking a shaky head, I know there's a lot of them out there, and a lot of guys have their favorite head. The head I prefer is actually, it's a Z-Man shaky heads, and it comes with a little collar. It's made for Elastec plastic, but it holds any kind of plastic up there better than most heads. One thing I really don't like about a head is a screw-in worm, where it keeps your worm on there, like a screw on the head. I like a worm that slides up on the shank of the hook. Regardless what it is, I want it to slide up there, and what that does, it creates a bow in your worm and gets that spiraling fall that makes a shaky head so effective. When throwing a shaky head on a spinning rod, I really like a braided line with a fluorocarbon leader. I use an 8-pound diameter Tough Line XP with most often 8-pound gamma fluorocarbon leader. And the reason for that is you end up with the same amount of stretch. A lot of times with light line, people have a problem breaking fish off. They want to set the hook harder when they're way out there, or too hard when they're close to the boat, break fish off. Here it's so consistent because you have the same amount of stretch if I cast across the lake or I drop it right next to the boat. Same amount of stretch. So your hook sets are always consistent, and also your sensitivity is there. You can feel with that braid so well. It doesn't matter how much line you have out, you're always going to be able to feel just as much if you're fishing really close to the boat, or if you're fishing really deep water or a really long cast. You have the same amount of sensitivity, and you're just going to catch a lot more fish, not only for the reason of feeling the fish, but you're going to feel a lot more what's on the bottom. You end up feeling rocks, trees, whatever it is, you know what's there. You get a better feel for the bottom, and in turn you catch more fish. The shaky head on a spinning rod has really been good to me. You know, it's a bait that I've won a lot of money on, done well in tournaments, and really like throwing it because of that. But I fish a little bit different. A lot of people throw a shaky head out there and they want to throw it out there and drag it along the bottom. And there's times that works. There's definitely a time and place for that. But I like to fish a little bit faster. A lot of times you get on these banks and you're almost swimming that worm. You can see I'm throwing like an eighth ounce here, but yet I'm just lifting that worm, causing it to glide and coast and hit the bottom again. I like to cover a lot more water with it. Still a finesse technique, you know, works on those fish that have seen a lot of other baits, but you're fishing a little more aggressively. It's not always on points, always dragging on the bottom. A lot of times it's fishing it down the bank and covering water, almost swimming that worm along. Like I said, you want to lift it up and it'll just glide along, come off the bottom and coast again. And in those fish, it's a real subtle presentation, but yet you're still covering some water and catch a lot more fish behind a lot of guys. There's one. It's not a giant, but we caught one. It's pretty amazing. That shaky head catches them all sizes. It's something you can throw about anywhere in the country and catch some kind of fish. You're going to catch them from 6 inches to 6 pounds and even bigger at times. Definitely one of my favorite baits to throw and one of the funnest baits I own.